I would say it's quite busy, eh? You're constantly busy making sure that every animal is, you know, looked after. It is hard. Like for me, obviously, I work in a facility, so I'm not a private conservationist per se, which makes it a lot easier. It's a lot easier working in a facility, whereas you've got a lot of guys who are working on their own, and it's a lot harder for them not having backing and stuff like that behind them. So yeah, it's cool. It's very busy. You're constantly on your toes. A lot of different things happening every day, which is nice. Yeah, I can't complain too much about it. It's quite different. There's a lot of days are different to the other one. So a lot of the time you'll be managing kind of what's going on at the facility. We've got three managers there, so we're constantly just brainstorming and coming up with new ways and ideas of how to get things done. So yeah, we'll have meetings. We'll be looking after animals, be hands-on sometimes. We do a lot of medical procedures, dealing with local vets and things like that. And yeah, every day is different, which is nice. It's never the same thing, which is obviously quite refreshing. As far as I know, in the initial lockdown, it would have been level 1, but now I see they're kind of loosening up on this level 3, and I think level 2 will be even more lenient. So we're hoping that possibly level 2 will be able to open, but yeah, if not, level 1 we'll have to stick to level 1, obviously. We didn't actually notice it too much, to be honest. We had spoken about it, and we had had our meetings regarding if it would affect us, which we did foresee it happening. But it's basically from the day that lockdown started, that I think it was the 26th of March, that from there onwards you really noticed it, because we obviously people through the doors are how we fund things. So when you stop seeing people come through the doors, it's quite a shock, because that's literally how you run the facility. So yeah, that was basically when we started noticing it. Beforehand, everyone was quite skeptical, but yeah, from day one of lockdown was when it really hit everyone hard in this industry, that it might be quite a long ride ahead. So at first, obviously, we did the necessary basics. We split staff up. We kind of split our team. We made a core team of sort of 3 or 4 guys that could come in just to mitigate the risk on everyone. And as the levels gradually started going down, we started introducing more and more people. But initially, what we did was basically, like I said, we split the team. We had obviously all our temperature readings. We had sanitization measures in place, all your social distancing. We provided all the staff with masks and their own hand sanitizers, their own transport to work, so they didn't have to get public transport. Basically, that's all we could do, was just kind of look out for our own staff, because in terms of the business, we knew that we were closing. So there wasn't much that in terms of having public members, there's not much we could do in the beginning, because we knew that they weren't going to be there. So we just focused on our staff, basically, and making sure that all of us were kind of all right at the center, and we had mitigated as much as possible. Before lockdown, we were sitting at about 14 staff at any given time, and that was just on the park side, and then we had about another 7 or 8 on the restaurant side. So the restaurant obviously closed, and they didn't have to come in, but on the park side we reduced it to 3 managers and 3 essential park staff. So we cut it down essentially to 3 instead of 16 or 17. Well, it's obviously been a lot quieter. less customers. But yeah, we've used it wisely. I think instead of looking at it as a massive negative, which essentially it is in a lot of senses, we've decided to look at it in a more positive light and use the time to actually grow the park in the direction that we want it. In terms of enclosures, in terms of how the animals are being kept, in terms of pretty much all the general day-to-day runnings. We've also used the time to get our social media presence out there a bit. We've done a lot of live videos, a lot of posting on our Facebook pages and Instagram pages, and it's pushed us, with the following that we've got just through this lockdown and through us posting that stuff has actually pushed us in such a nice direction where we've got quite a loyal sort of supporting group, and that's super helpful to have, and we obviously appreciate that a lot. But we've dealt with it, and I think dealing with everyone, our clients, we don't really have clients at the moment. We have had a lot of people phoning in asking when we'll be opening and that kind of thing. But yeah, dealing with obviously the staff and the employees and ourselves, it's just been kind of day-to-day going. We still go in every day, feed and clean the animals, and make sure the park is being looked after properly. Yeah. Yeah, so basically on the wildlife and tourism industry as a whole, COVID has obviously the biggest effect COVID has had is financial. All the facilities have taken a huge knock. But in terms of wildlife, it was quite refreshing in the beginning. The first month or so, I was driving from Scottsboro to Durban and back, obviously, and I noticed straight away the air quality and the cleanliness of the air coming down from Toti to Durban. I could see the whole city skyline, which is very unusual. And I think that was the biggest thing. It's quite hard to quantify how wildlife is doing in such a short space of time. Obviously, it takes a long time for things to reproduce and repopulate areas and that kind of thing. So there's no real hard evidence of wildlife doing well, but with less people around, wildlife is guaranteed to thrive. That's just the way it works. So yeah, I think in that sense, the first sort of month or two, COVID was probably quite a good thing for wildlife. You probably saw a bit more birds around, a few more, the air was cleaner, like I said. So yeah, I think it definitely was positive at first. Now, as we've gradually gone down in levels, you've obviously started to see the air quality depreciate a little bit, and as people sort of encroach on environments again and are driving more, it's obviously impacting the wildlife again, as it would normally. So yeah, that's the main thing. And then in terms of facilities, it's the financial loss. That's the biggest thing that everyone's kind of sort of, I don't want to say crying about, but everyone's kind of unhappy about, because it's a huge problem. You've got so much. I mean, that's how you run your facility. That's how you do everything, is through money. In terms of the facility. So yeah, it has been quite hard in that sense. So we've actually done quite a lot of using our social media platforms to kind of get our voice out there a bit during lockdown. We didn't just want to sit and wait for the lockdown to be over. So we started like sort of mini series type things where we've got different species that we talk about. We started off doing 3 a week, and then as the lockdown got less and less, we dropped it sort of 2 a week, and now we're sitting on one video a week, and they were all live videos. And then we would do a post every sort of second day or third day, an informative post where we could engage with people. We also offered sort of like question and answer sessions towards the end of our live videos, where people could send through a question, and then we would answer it on the live video, or if they sent it through afterwards, we would just reply to them in the comment. So that's obviously been our biggest our push in terms of social media and keeping in contact with people. And then yeah, we've had a lot of people phoning in asking when we're going to be opening, when are they allowed to come back, and that's when you also kind of chat to them and just tell them, you know what, we're not sure yet, but keep in touch. Go onto our social media. We'll post everything on there, and that kind of keeps people sort of in line with where you're trying to go and what your aim is. In the short term, I think our plan is just to kind of open again. We've got a lot of things in place for when we do open that we want to kind of offer to the public, just to create that extra attraction, an extra want to come. I think people will want to come anyway. I think people kind of want to get out and do things again. But in the long term, I think it's just that we are able to sustain ourselves. Obviously, we have taken a big knock, but to kind of recuperate that money and then move forward thereafter, just to kind of grow the company or grow the facility as a whole. But obviously, you've got to kind of recuperate the money you've lost and try and move forward after you've recouped whatever you can, type of thing. So I think that's just the long term, is kind of to sustain ourselves and then excel in what we are doing. Because I feel like we're doing a lot of good work at the moment. So if we carry on pushing it, and I think the people are realizing, and the more people we can kind of reach, the more we've got that support and that backing, that local support and backing, which is what you want. You want kind of a community support that you can kind of fall back on if you need it at some point. But yeah, I think that's basically the short and long term, is just kind of sustaining ourselves and then excelling once we've got to that plateau again. Rewarding, stressful at times, and worthwhile. I think it's super rewarding and worthwhile. I think it's kind of made everyone a bit wary about going on holiday. I also feel like a lot of businesses and people have either, potentially been retrenched or made redundant, possibly lost jobs and things like that. So I think in terms of business, I think there's been a lot of money lost, which might prevent a lot of holidays and a lot of people going on holidays. But I think in terms of people's mental like psyche, I think obviously people want to get out now. They've been kind of cooped up for the last 3 months. And I think getting out would be obviously something that everyone wants. I know I've been wanting to get out. I'd love to get out and go away or go on holiday or whatever. So having little places like our facility open would be nice. It's something where you don't have to go on a massive holiday. You can kind of go and spend the day there and just clear the mind a bit if you need to. Client interaction, I think obviously everyone will still be keeping their distance. I know we've put a whole bunch of measures in place in terms of, like, for instance, simple things like at the cashiers, you've got screening things now. It's no more like it used to be, where you can just kind of talk to people and it's things have changed a little bit. I think it'll go back to normal quite quickly. I don't think people will keep it up for too long, where you're constantly wearing masks and constantly wearing visors. So in terms of the interaction, I don't know, it's quite a hard one to answer. I think it'll go back to normal quite quickly. In 6 months' time, you're probably still going to have a few measures in place. There will still be social distancing and sort of wearing masks, and that thing out into the public will still be a thing, I think, by the end of the year. But yeah, I think thereafter it will kind of sort of fade away. I don't think this could last forever, When it comes to, obviously, you're interacting with animals, I know from our side we've stopped it now, just for this COVID-19 period. So I think most of your places have done that. Obviously, for instance, if you're holding a snake and you pass it from one person to the next, it's constant. You're just passing around everyone's. So yeah, I think in terms of that, I think that for the next 6 months, you probably won't see any of that anyway. And I think that's completely understandable, given the circumstances. But yeah, I think that, like I say again, thereafter, I think it will start slowing down and things will kind of start going back to a bit of normality in terms of the way people are doing things. We're in a very fortunate position that we have actually got a parent company that clouds us. So we are kind of owned by a big agricultural company called Crooks Brothers, and they've kind of kept us, we've been able to fall back on them now that we haven't had money. So, well, haven't had an income. So yeah, but I think at the industry in general, most of your private facilities have made a huge loss. And I've heard of facilities that are kind of on the brink of closing down because they haven't had money. They've got staff to kind of pay, and you can't pay your staff. What do? You can't feed your animals. What do? You're not going to just let them stay there. So yeah, but going back to us, we're in a very, very fortunate position that we've got a parent company who can fund us and who we've been able to fall back on for these few months until we can kind of get back onto our feet. But the industry as a whole has taken a gigantic knock, and all your private facilities have really struggled in terms of making ends meet and paying staff. And even in feeding animals in some instances. I think obviously all your basic stuff, temperature screening at the door, hand sanitizing at the door. We've put up perspex screens in front of the cashiers. We'll have social distancing announcements every couple of hours. And it's just your basic stuff, hand sanitizers in the bathrooms, demarcated areas for people to kind of stand and wait in lines and that kind of thing. Obviously, you want to do more cashless payments than cash payments. So it's just your basic stuff. We out in the open, as I said, so we've got a lot of space. People generally don't actually need to kind of go anywhere near each other. We're very out in the open. So it's just all your basic measures that I think most companies are taking now, with your hand sanitizing and your temperature screening and social distancing. I'm not aware of any decreasing wages or redundancies. I know from our side, as I mentioned, with our parent company, we've been fortunate enough to still, all of us have still had salaries through this time, and no decrease in wages or salaries, which has been really helpful. But across the sectors, I haven't heard. I think people are keeping quite quiet about it, understandably. So yeah. Obviously, initially now it's been affected massively. But I think going forward, there will still be a knock-on effect. We rely a lot on tourists, and as I mentioned, there will be a lot less holidays happening, which essentially means a lot less tourists, which again in turn means less money. So I think there will be a big knock-on effect. I think everyone's kind of going to take a knock for a while after this. I don't think once the lockdown stops, I don't think it's just going to resume back to normal and you're going to go back to your normal turnover and that kind of thing. But I think it will take a bit of time. You're probably looking at a year and a half before you're starting to get your numbers back up again, where people have recouped a bit of money, and people are actually able to go out and spend the extra money on things like luxuries. These are essentially luxuries, going to places like this. So yeah, I think it'll take a bit of time before it gets back to normal. I think reducing the rates is probably a good thing. It's probably a smart thing to do, with people having less money and less sort of spare money lying around. I think obviously the cheaper the accommodation or the place that you're going to stay, the more affordable it is, the more people you're going to get. I think it's basic sort of supply and demand there. I think if they can sort of keep it up for a while, just to get their kind of, like I said earlier, back to that plateau where they're at a stable area, then I'm sure eventually they'll rise again and start climbing the next mountain of high rates. It would have definitely been a positive impact on it. In terms of, obviously my forte is reptiles and snakes. Snakes will often go onto roads because they're warm. The roads are warmer and they can sort of keep warmer there, and you often see flattened snakes. There's hundreds and thousands of snakes that get flattened every day on the road. Snakes, tortoises, lizards, you name it. So in that sense, with less cars, you've got less dead animals on the road. That's your first most visible and basic positive. And then like I said, your birds and everything that are flying around. I noticed a lot more birds in the urban areas. There were a lot less people, which obviously means more monkeys were coming into the areas, more birds. And also your smaller things like your lizards and your geckos and that kind of thing were all over the place in sort of smaller towns and some of your smaller cities too. So I think all in all, the first 5 weeks, the hard lockdown was super positive for wildlife and for kind of the whole sort of wildlife sector in general. I think I even noticed a difference in our captive animals, where you could see that they were kind of after sort of 2 or 3 weeks of not seeing any people, they were kind of got used to not having people there. So when all the staff were in one place or at an animal's enclosure, the animal starts thinking, what's going on here? So it's all positive. It's all part of enrichment, and I think for your wild animals, having less people around is always going to be kind of a more positive thing. Yeah, we did do a few calls. Obviously we're going into winter now, so naturally your calls kind of slowed down. But we did do a few. We were allowed to. There were a few facilities and people who were given permits to do it. So yeah, we did do a few, and you kind of just carried your normal, wear your mask, go to the call, get it done, and then kind of get out. So yeah, it was alright. Like I've mentioned, our social media platforms are really trying to push it. So we're hoping that through the videos and through the sharing of our videos overseas, we hopefully are going to get people to see us and kind of notice who we are. Yeah, so I think that's the main way you can do it, through our website, through our social media platforms, and through our sort of public relations and our press releases and that kind of thing that we've been doing. They've kind of gained quite a bit of traction. And then as I mentioned, as we sort of open up a bit more, we do want to add more attractions to the park, things that will draw people in to want to come and see us. So yeah, I think that's sort of the main thing we can do, is kind of reach people through our online presence and through them seeing our content, and then hopefully that just translates into them coming and visiting us. Sure, that's a tough one. Actually, so like I've mentioned, we've got the parent company, so our funds haven't dried up at our facility, but I wouldn't actually know what they would do with the animals after, if the funds did dry up. You would have to look at rehoming them at other facilities, I would think, whether they be local or international. These days you've kind of got access to information from worldwide facilities. You can almost see what collections people have got, what they've got surplus, what they're looking for. So that would probably be the first thing you would do, is kind of look for facilities, looking for the animals that you've got that you can rehome as quickly as possible, knowing that they are going to go to a good home and they're not going to get neglected in any way. That's the first thing that everyone has to look into, is the welfare side of things. Your ethics and welfare needs to be on point all the time. Otherwise, if it's not, you shouldn't be doing it. I think the exact number, I think we're sitting on about 54 species. And then in terms of animals themselves, I think we're sitting on about 400 and just under 440 animals on the park. Obviously, going into this time of year, it's for diving. So we situated just on the south coast there, right by Aliwal Shoal, which is obviously a diving hotspot. And this time of year is like the best time for diving. So this is when we get most of our tourists, from April, May, June, July, this sort of time. And yeah, obviously we've had none of them, so it's put a huge dent in our finances. But yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing, is the diving sort of charters and the tourism businesses in the industry. They'll often bring their divers to us after they've done their diving, or on one of the days they'll allocate a day where they can come and visit us instead of diving. And yeah, we've had none of that, so that's a huge loss. And you're looking at groups of sort of like 15 to 20 people at a time coming through. Yeah, it's definitely leaves a decent dent in your finances though. I think because of the position we are in with the parent company clouding us, I'm hopeful that we will be able to. I think we possibly will, but in terms of your private facilities, it's obviously going to be a bit harder for them. I can't really comment on any of their finances. I don't know what their finances are like, but just judging on the losses that kind of people are making in terms of still paying salaries and still feeding animals and still paying for electricity, because the animals also cost a lot. You use a lot of electricity just to heat your animals. I mean, snakes and lizards, they all sort of need to thermoregulate. So you've got, yeah, I think we'll be fine, and hoping the other facilities are able to be fine as well. But it is obviously, it's a long shot. You've got there's huge financial implications that everyone's kind of struggling with at the moment. I think it would definitely help. So you'll probably find that a lot of places, like I said, with people wanting to get out, you'll probably find people will go and visit these places. But you probably will find that it would probably cover costs, but not much more than that. Running costs are generally quite high in places like this. As I mentioned, you use a lot of water, you use a lot of electricity, and you've obviously got quite a lot of staff to pay for. If you're looking after so many animals, it's not an easy job. So I think it probably will just about be able to sustain the facility, but not for long. You're going to have to start getting back to your normal sort of turnover to start. It's a classic saying, you live within your means. So you start running the place at the level that you want to run it at with the turnover that you're used to. And as soon as that dropping levels and dropping the way you do things is not something that you want to do. You've reached a certain level, and no one wants to drop a level. You're always trying to move forward. So yeah, I think it will be able to sustain the industry for a short time, but not for very long. Yeah, I think the people of KZN should just kind of support their local, the local tourism, KZN tourism as a whole. There's so many beautiful places to go and things to do, and hopefully the local communities can support what they have in their towns and in their cities. Every little town and city has got something cool to do in KZN. So yeah, I would just encourage that people kind of get out and go and support local, kind of come together and just like push your local communities and the touristy things to do in your local communities. I think that would really help the industry massively.